Greetings, folks. Omri here. I hope you're well. First, fragile things generally don't like the battle against time. When something has cracks, time is usually its nemesis. Thus, the recent Supreme Court opinion abolishing race-based affirmative action for elite universities is an example of how time was the deciding factor in what we've observed, at least in the form of affirmative action that was negated. It was a fragile notion. In 2014, I was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right inside of Boston. The first case came about around that time. President Obama was in office, and the Supreme Court, for all intents and purposes, was moving to the right. That meant that the justices that were in the middle were siding with the majority a good amount of the time. Again, the case registered in 2019 when Judge Allison Burroughs affirmed the principles of Harvard's admission policy. A lot of people applauded Judge Burroughs and the decision. Then the court flipped during the Trump administration. I think what Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was saying when she said, as a result of the Grutter case, that 25 years from now, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary to further the interest approved today. I think she saw this coming. And so she saw it coming primarily because of 20 justices that have been selected over the past 54 years since President Nixon took office. 20 confirmed appointments, 15 of them Republican, 5 of them Democratic. She knew this. From 2019, when I started writing my book, Reconstructing Inclusion, Making DEI Accessible, Actionable, and Sustainable, I started looking at some of these aspects of affirmative action and what some of the opinions were. Over the past 3 months, I've ramped that up. I was watching videos, listening to podcasts, reading academic journals and popular articles from writers who both adamantly support affirmative action and others who have wanted it abolished for a long time. I read and listened to several books worth of content. The arguments were rarely nuanced, and most didn't seek out disconfirmation of the content creator's core hypotheses. Some did a decent job, but most were advocates of affirmative action being completely abolished as it pertained to race, or the opposite view of seeing affirmative action chiseled into perpetuity and in with this forever affirmative action stance. After the decision came down, many of them turned to prognosticating about how bleak the future will be for African Americans and Hispanics, those mostly impacted by the decision. In my exploration after the court's opinions, 2 contrasting pieces of content came up, 2 contrasting opinions from The Atlantic stood out. One, by How to Be an Anti-Racist author Ibram X. Kendi, and co-author Uma Jayakumar. It was entitled Race Neutral is the New Separate but Equal. And the other article from The Atlantic, The Failure of Affirmative Action. Now, this one was by Bertrand Cooper. He's a less well-known author out of Los Angeles, but a quite compelling story. So there were 2 quotes that were in contrast. From the Kendi Jayakumar article, their quote was, "So what about class? Class-based or income-based interventions disproportionately help white students too, because their family's low income is least likely to extend to their community and schools, which is to say that low-income white Americans are far and away less likely than low-income Black and Latino Americans to live in densely impoverished neighborhoods and send their kids to poorly resourced public schools." Cooper writes in his article, Harvard used race-conscious admissions to saturate itself with students drawn from the highest earning segments of Black America. The reality is that for the Black poor, a world without affirmative action is just the world as it is, no different than before. What I recognized in this contrast was what leaves me ambivalent about the court's opinion. Of course, the Chicken Little, the sky is falling, DEI practitioner doomsday scenarios could happen. I tend to lean on our collective agency as people committed to creating organizations in which DEI is normative accessible to all, unambiguously prioritized, and purpose aligned. It occurs to me that it could finally jolt DEI practitioners, our clients and employers, to go deeper in our approaches, to move toward the creation of sustainable design that accounts for all differences and similarities and goes upstream to address historical inequities that are producing current results. So I hope that was helpful. I also hope you get a chance to subscribe to our Substack and read the article that I just published on this in long form. Make it a great day. Peace.